Eu sei uma forma natural de estabilizar sua tipo 2. Eu vou te contar como. Parece loucura, mas me dê apenas 60 segundos para explicar. A verdade é que tudo que você acredita saber sobre tipo 2 está em grande parte errado. Depois de décadas lutando contra a doença e desejando não ter tipo 2, finalmente encontrei algo que funciona rápido. Você sabia que o que está se formando ao redor do seu pâncreas neste exato momento pode estar sabotando sua saúde a cada segundo? Acredite, o desequilíbrio da glicose pode ser revertido. Talvez você ainda não perceba isso, mas a verdadeira causa da tipo 2 não estaria diretamente ligada ao açúcar, aos carboidratos ou mesmo à idade. E aqui está a parte mais surpreendente. Esse truque pouco conhecido transforma o seu próprio sistema imunológico em uma arma contra a diabetes tipo 2. Enquanto isso, uma receita japonesa simples de 30 segundos está ajudando os tratamentos convencionais a se livrarem do parasita escondido no seu pâncreas. Sim, um organismo real que teria resistido a praticamente todos os suplementos que você já tentou. Tudo começou quando uma equipe da Johns Hopkins, junto com um médico indicado ao prêmio Lois Jovanovic, descobriu esse parasita oculto. E mais importante, encontrou uma receita que o ataca diretamente, em vez de apenas adicionar mais substâncias ao organismo, como muitos suplementos fazem. Esse truque leva apenas 30 segundos. Você faz antes de dormir. Só isso. O vídeo que mostra como fazer é curto, gratuito e a receita é mais fácil do que engolir comprimidos. A indústria farmacêutica já tentou remover esse conteúdo da internet 2 vezes. Então, se ele ainda estiver disponível, assista antes que seja retirado novamente.
I'm going to tell you something it took me years to understand. And maybe by the end of this conversation, it'll make as much sense to you as it finally made to me. For a long time in my life, I did everything right. I woke up early, I worked hard, I kept my word, I paid my bills, carried my responsibilities, did what's expected of someone who's trying to make it. On the outside, it looked like everything was in place. But on the inside, there was an emptiness I just couldn't explain. I was tired all the time. Not the kind of tired a good night's sleep fixes. It was something deeper, a tiredness of the soul. I was always chasing something, telling myself that once I reached the next goal, I'd finally feel at peace. But I'd get there, and the peace never came. What came was only the next goal. And the next. And the next. It was like climbing a staircase that never ended without ever stopping to ask if it was even the right staircase to begin with. Let me be honest with you about where I was. I had confused movement with direction. I was busy every single moment, but I wasn't going anywhere that actually mattered. I woke up reacting. I went to sleep reacting. I spent entire days putting out fires, answering to what everyone else wanted, living on autopilot. And in the few quiet moments when the house went still and it was just me and myself, I felt deep down that I was living someone else's life, a life that looked right on paper, but had nothing to do with who I really was. And what did I do with that discomfort? I blamed everything out there. I blamed time, which was never enough. I blamed circumstances, which were never in my favor. I blamed people who never understood. I blamed luck, which always seemed to smile on everyone but me. It was always something on the outside holding my life back. Always an external villain, always an excuse, ready to go. Until one day, something happened. It wasn't anything big. It wasn't a tragedy, and it wasn't a miracle. It was just a silence that lasted a little longer than usual. I was sitting there, alone, and out of nowhere, a question came to me, a question I'd never had the courage to ask. It was simple. If I keep going exactly as I am today, making exactly the same choices, do I actually want to end up where this path leads? And the answer, deep down, was no. A no that hurt. But an honest no, and in that same instant, a second realization hit me. And that one was the hardest to swallow. I realized that the one thing all my problems had in common was me. It wasn't the circumstances. It wasn't the people. It wasn't luck. It was the way I thought, the way I chose, the way I treated myself on the inside every single day without even noticing. That might sound like a harsh thing to realize, and it is. But it was at the same time the most freeing moment of my life. Because if the problem were only out there, I'd be a prisoner of the outside world forever. But if part of the problem was in me, then part of the solution was in me too. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had some power over my own life. That was the beginning. Not of some dramatic change from the outside in, but of a quiet shift from the inside out. The first thing I changed wasn't my routine. It wasn't my job. It wasn't anything out there. It was the conversation I was having with myself. Because I noticed something frightening. I spent the whole day sabotaging myself on the inside, beating myself up over everything, shrinking myself with every mistake, comparing myself to everyone all the time. The voice that lived in my head was the voice of someone who didn't like me, and I kept listening to that voice as if it were the truth. So I asked myself another question: would I talk to someone I love the way I talk to myself? And the answer was never. Not in a million years. I would never treat a friend, a child, someone dear to me with the harshness I treated myself with every day. And right there, I understood that you can't build a big life while you're tearing yourself down on the inside. So I started to change that, slowly, not overnight. Every time that harsh voice showed up, I'd catch it, breathe, and trade it for a voice that was firmer and kinder. It wasn't some nice self-help slogan. It was practice, repetition, day after day. At first, it even felt forced. But over time, it became natural. And something I didn't expect happened. When I changed the way I spoke to myself, I changed the way I acted. Someone who treats himself with respect starts making more dignified choices. That was the first choice. And it opened the door to all the others. Now, I have to be honest with you about something. Because I hate when these stories get told like they were perfect. It wasn't a straight line. I slipped many times. There were days the old voice came back full force. There were weeks I gave up on everything I'd started and went right back to autopilot. There were moments I looked back and thought, it's no use, this is just who I am. But that's where I learned the most important lesson of all. What changes a life isn't never falling. It's the speed with which you get back up. It's not about being perfect. It's about being stubborn in the right direction. Every time I fell and I came back a little faster. And that maybe was the real turning point. I stopped demanding perfection from myself, and I simply refused to quit. The second choice was a stranger one for me. I decided to slow down. For someone addicted to being busy, stopping felt like a waste. It felt like laziness. It felt like falling behind. But I started setting aside a few minutes of my day just to be in silence. No phone, no noise, producing nothing. Just me, my breathing, and the attempt to reconnect with myself. At first, it was uncomfortable. Very. My mind screamed. My thoughts tripped over each other. That anxiety came up, the kind you feel when you think you should be doing something else. But I kept at it. And over time, in that silence, something began to settle. The waters that were always stirred up started to calm. And when the water settles, you can finally see the bottom. It was there, in that space, that I found something I had lost without even noticing. a sense of connection with something greater than me. With a purpose, I could feel pulsing behind my choices. With the wisest part of myself, the part that always knew the right way, but lived drowned out by the noise of daily life. That's when my spirituality stopped being a distant word and became something real, concrete, lived day by day. Not as a religion I followed out of obligation, but as a presence I had finally stopped to listen to. And in that reconnection, two things began to grow inside me, slowly, like roots. The first was gratitude. I used to keep my eyes glued to what was missing, always on the next achievement, on what I didn't have yet, on what others had and I didn't. So I started a simple practice. Every day I'd pause for a moment and really look at what I already had. The health, to be able to breathe, the people who were there, a roof, bread, one more day. It sounds small, but when you start to see what already exists, your whole world changes color. And here's the curious part. It wasn't my life that changed first. It was the way I was looking at it. Life came after. The second thing that grew was faith. And I'm not talking about a passive faith that waits with its arms crossed for the sky to fix everything. I'm talking about a faith that acts. The confidence to do my part with everything I have, the best I can, and to hand over in peace what doesn't depend on me, because I used to try to control every detail, every outcome, every reaction from other people. And it was eating me alive. The day I learned to let go of what I can't control and to focus my energy on what I can, it was like taking a backpack full of stones off my shoulders. And strangely enough, it was exactly when I let go of control that things began to flow. From that point on, my life became a sequence of small, repeated choices. And I want to tell you what they were, because they're available to you too right now. I chose to protect my energy. I stopped spending my time and attention on what drained me, on arguments that led nowhere, on news that only dragged me down, on demands that weren't even mine to carry. Your energy is your most valuable asset, and almost no one teaches you to protect it. I chose my company carefully. I noticed a hard truth. We become the average of the people we spend our time with. So I started getting closer to those who lifted me up, who pulled me forward, who talked about dreams instead of just complaining. And I stepped away without guilt, without a fight, quietly from what was making me sick on the inside. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I chose to honor the word I gave to myself. I was always careful with the promises I made to others, but the ones I made to myself, those I broke without the slightest guilt. So I flipped it. The promises I make to myself now matter just as much as the ones I make to anyone else. And do you know what happens when you start keeping the promises you make to yourself? You finally begin to trust yourself. And that self-trust changes absolutely everything. And I chose presence. I learned to live the moment I was actually living instead of always having my head in the next problem. To eat while paying attention to the food, to listen while paying attention to the person speaking, to be fully where my body was. Because I discovered that life doesn't happen in the future we keep planning, or in the past we keep replaying. Life happens now. And whoever doesn't learn to be present loses their own life while they're distracted, waiting for it to begin. None of these choices, on its own, seem like a big deal. Looking at them one by one, anyone would say, that's so simple. That changes nothing.